Hey everyone, I am so excited to be doing another interview here on the podcast, and I'm very pleased to welcome Cristen Jennette on as our guest today. So, Cristen Jennette is a mom, English teacher, and fantasy author. Each of her novels features strong female characters and dragons. Currently residing in Northwest Missouri, Cristen Jennette enjoys hanging out with her son, spending afternoons on the back porch, and sharing her love of literature with her students. So, welcome, Cristen.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I love that you mentioned spending afternoons on the back porch in your bio because when
Yes.
I follow you on Instagram, that's what I see a lot in your stories.
Mhm.
So I love
Yep.
that. Do you get really good weather there in Missouri?
For the most part, like
Yeah.
this morning, it's been like 70 degrees, sunny, perfect breeze. So
Oh, that just sounds
perfect time to
so
read outside.
nice.
Yeah.
So nice. It's like spring, perfect weather, and I need to
Yes.
take advantage of that here as well because we're getting some pretty good weather as well. So,
Awesome.
yeah. All right. Well, I can't wait to learn more about your writing journey. I mean, we've been talked a ton on Instagram about books and writing and various things, but
Mhm.
I'm excited to learn a bit more about your backstory with writing and indie publishing. So tell us a bit about when writing started for you and what that journey's been like.
All right. So writing started for me way back in high school, actually. I was one of those students that, you give me the work, I finish the work, and then I would sit there and go, I don't know what else to do. So for the most part, I would read books, and then eventually I was like, what if I also wrote my own book? And in high school, it was around the same time that Christopher Paolini published Aragon. I was like, what if I could be a teen author like he was? That didn't happen, but it is when I started writing my very first book, The Lenore Legacy. I would write it in tidbits when I had time during class. Um, and then I worked on that intermittently throughout the rest of high school, through college. And when spring of 2020 happened, our school got shut down, but teachers were still asked to go into the building twice a week. But I didn't have students to teach. We weren't doing online classes, but I had to sit in my classroom for about 8 hours a week. And I was like, I'm going to write this book. And so I wrote the entire book. I started over, rewrote the whole thing, and then started doing research on indie publish versus traditional publish, and ultimately decided to go indie publish, which I know we'll touch on later. Um, and then I think, yeah, so that would be the main thing of the author journey, was starting in high school and then eventually that spring of 2020 when I was like, I literally have nothing else to do. I had the entire next school year planned out, and I was like, I might as well do something I've always wanted to do that I hadn't had the time to do yet. So,
Right. That's so cool. I didn't know that you started writing the Lenore Legacy in high school.
yep.
Wow. So it's been quite a few years in a progress, I'm sure.
Yes.
So, and
Yeah.
then when you were writing it again or working on it in 2020, and
Mhm.
was there a ton you had to scrap and start over or
Oh, I just started from scratch. I was like, I like the idea. I like the characters. We're just going to start over. Because when I wrote
right?
it in high school, I wrote it in first person perspective for the main character, for Rosalind.
Oh,
And then when I went back to rewrite it, I was like, this isn't going to work. This is more of an epic fantasy world, which means we need multiple characters and multiple points of view. So in spring of 2020 is when I switched that around and started learning how to craft the different perspectives.
gotcha. And was that the main project that you worked on from high school until 2020? Or were
Yes.
there other books? Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Very, very cool. And so your head was just so delved into that world. So I'm sure, like, when we talk about Lone
Yes.
Soul later, I am curious to know that transition to a
Right.
brand new project. So that's very
Absolutely.
cool. And that's cool
Yep.
that you wrote during 2020. I feel like that was a year for a lot of us where either
Mhm.
we wasted our time at home or we actually took advantage of that time to do something
Right.
we've always wanted to do. So that's really cool that you're able to take that time, you decide I am going to dedicate myself writing and finishing this book. So that's very
Yep.
neat. Very neat.
Yeah.
Cool. And then what made you decide to go the indie route?
So the main reason I went indie route was for scheduling purposes, because even if I do have equals more success with my books, I plan on continuing to teach. I love my job as a teacher. I can't see myself not teaching. even if I could live off of the income of my books. I know with traditional publishing, they're very specific of, well, you have to publish at this point, at this time, or you're gonna have to find a new publisher. And I didn't want to have that stress in addition to everything else going on. I also didn't want them to come back and say, we like the story, but we want you to add this type of content that I may not be comfortable writing, and different things like that. So with indie publishing, I know that it's the story I really want to tell rather than what somebody else thinks I should be telling.
Right. I love that. That's probably one of my favorite parts of indie publishing is that you can decide direction of your story and then have the freedom with other things with the publishing process as well, like choosing your editor and the cover
Mhm.
designer, how you want the cover to look like, how you market. It's just all in
Yeah,
your control. So,
absolutely.
yeah, that's amazing. And then, yeah, as far as scheduling goes, I've heard like from authors who have even gone traditional, even say, keep your current job because you don't know how your book is going to do. And yeah, I can understand like that stress of, with the royalties, advancements, not knowing if the book's going to do well or not, if you can really rely on the publisher. So I think that's really smart that you want to keep your teacher job, but still want to write and publish. And then I can see it being so much easier being an indie author that you can make your own deadlines, your own schedules, and work with your job.
Yes.
Yeah.
It means I know not to schedule a book release when I'm also running homecoming because that is part of my job at the school is to run homecoming. And a traditional publisher may be like, well, we want the book to come out at this point, so make it work. And I'm like, I can't do all that in a week.
Yeah.
So that is a really nice thing about indie publishing is that we can decide our own deadlines and we can also change those deadlines when the need arises.
Yes. I love how flexible that is so much. Okay, let's talk about Lone Soul. So this is
Okay.
your newest release. Can you
Yes.
give us a brief pitch on it?
I can. So, Lone Soul would be an urban fantasy murder mystery that showcases the benefits and drawbacks of societal control. I'd say it's perfect for fans of Red Rising who really enjoy gritty realism with a little dose of levity, right? So you have that really authentic, this is the reality of what can happen, and there's still a little bit of comic relief.
Love it. And I'm so interested to know. So, you wrote the Lenore Legacy, which is this epic fantasy, and then you
Mhm.
write an urban fantasy murder
Yeah.
mystery. So different. What was that
Okay.
transition like for you?
Oh goodness. Okay, so I mean, one of the main reasons I went urban fantasy was because I'd spent so much time in epic fantasy that I wanted something different to delve into. And after I read Red Rising, I was like, this is really fun. It's so cutthroat and so action-packed. I was like, I wonder if I can do something similar, but also pay homage to some of my own lifestyle. And so that's why there's the school setting in Lone Soul with one of the characters becoming a science teacher, um, and just the overall process. I basically sat down and I was like, what if we had elemental magic wielders that also had cell phones? Was kind of where I started as well. And it just kind of grew from there. And I would ask people questions of like, how would you think these different elemental situations would work in an urban setting? And what are some questions you would have about magic working with our world and stuff like that? So eventually I came up with the idea of a pantheon that controls the vast majority of it and decides like who gets what and everything, which is of course discussed throughout the book. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
kind of where it came from. Just
that's really cool. I love
yeah.
that inspiration and like that. Like, I feel like, I don't know, I've never written an urban fantasy before, but do you feel like in ways it was a bit easier than the epic fantasy because you were drawing
Oh, yeah,
from your experience?
absolutely. Because instead of trying to recreate like what does a castle look like, how do you practice sword fighting, it was I know how to drive a car, I do that every
Yeah.
day. I know how to call somebody on a cell phone, I do that almost every day too. So it felt more just like I was narrating my own life in a way instead
Yeah.
of like dropping myself into Game of Thrones.
Right. And then you introduced the magic system in it, which I'm curious what your inspiration was for this magic system and what was it like writing magic in a world like ours?
I don't remember where exactly I got the idea for the magic system. Other than I know the tattoos on their hands with the labels for their numbers also comes from Red Rising. In Red Rising, they have different groups of people that have, what do they call them? Um, like there's a name for them for each of the different colors of people.
Hmm.
Sigils. They have different sigils on their hands. And I was like, what if it's similar, but it determines like your overall job in life and matches what magic you can wield. So people who can wield the fire have the red numbers, people who can wield air have white. Um, and then integrating it into what feels like our own reality, I I just went with it, I guess. I don't have a specific like how I thought of it other than I just wrote it.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like it would be like kind of fun to explore because, obviously we don't have magic, but to just imagine what if we did and what
Right.
would it look like? And so cool.
Mhm.
And then you also have this society, like a caste system that's
Mhm.
related to the magic as well. So,
Yeah.
and was that inspiration also from Red Rising? Did you gain
A
that from
little
other
bit, yeah.
sources?
It was somewhat from Red Rising, and it was also from because some of this I did also think of while I was finishing out Lenore Legacy throughout the years, and how just the difference in how teachers were treated from around 2020 to later, and how like we were these heroes and these amazing people, and then we went back to being, well, teachers don't know what they're doing.
Mm,
And so I was thinking of that dynamic and how people judge us just based on one simple factor, right? And so in Lone Soul, you see a lot of people being judged because, oh, you're just a one, right? And so that's part of where that came from, was part of our own society as well and how we treat each other,
that's
unfortunately.
so interesting. Yeah, yeah, unfortunately. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
really interesting that, and I can totally see that. And I think a lot of like, if teachers were to read this, they would be like, yeah, I can totally relate to this character. So that's really interesting. And then also with like, I feel like caste systems are just like so like we're drawn to reading them. Just I don't know why exactly, but maybe it's just because like there's been a lot of popular books that have that.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like I don't know, what's your take on that?
I think us being drawn to caste systems might just be because we've seen it so often throughout history, and we see that cycle repeat, right? We see a
Mm,
caste system and maybe we don't acknowledge that it is a caste system until the caste system is broken. And then it just, like I said, it repeats because history tends to repeat itself. And so we're drawn to books about how to try and break that cycle, is how I see
right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. It's part of our history. It's kind of psychological as well. And yeah, that's so interesting. And just human behavior and all
it. Hmm.
that. So,
Yep.
in your book also has a murder mystery in it. So,
Yeah.
what was that? What was your process for writing a murder mystery in this setting?
So this is, I don't want it to sound awful and terrible, but sometimes when you're frustrated with students, you think of things, right? They're like, what would teachers do if one of their students legitimately got murdered? And I was like, let's see how that would play out. Granted, it's not the teachers murdering the students. I'll give that as
Yeah.
a feel. Um, that was one of my thoughts at one point. That I was like, how would we handle that if it happened in the building? If I came to work one day and was told one of my students was murdered a week ago, what would I do? How would I react? And
Hmm.
so that was part of why I included that. There's also an overarching thing that will be throughout the entire duology of why various people have been murdered and what other factions within the story were trying to do with that. Um, so that was kind of the start of how the murder mystery became a thing. And I really wanted to try a different genre than the epic fantasy. And I really wanted to test my ability as a writer. Can I write in different genres other than just the genre I write the most?
Yeah. I really like that. And I think that's a very admirable thing to do because I think we can get so caught up in just wanting to just write what we're good at and what we're familiar with. And I think broadening ourselves to writing different genres helps us to become stronger writers and just explore something that we've never done before. And
Oh,
I think that's really cool that you wanted to do that.
thank you.
And then What were some of your favorite parts of writing Lone Soul, and what were some of the most difficult parts of writing it?
So favorite parts would be crafting our little pet dragon Pete. He is the most adorable part of the book, and he's the most fun to include in just the most random moments because he's really good at breaking tension, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
most pets are. They just show up at the most random times and do something sweet and adorable that it just makes you smile. Um, and then my other favorite part was just the overall growth of the characters and what they learned throughout the course of the book and how they are able to acknowledge their past mistakes and grow from those mistakes, which I think is really important for characters to be able to do. And not, I feel like not every book does that as well, where the characters truly acknowledge, I made a mistake, but I can do better.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then for most difficult, would actually be writing the murder scenes because I felt guilty. Especially since I did the second person POV. And so I was like, I feel like I'm talking directly to somebody. And I feel like as I'm writing the scene, but it's almost like I'm murdering somebody, even though I'm not, I'm just writing the words. But it was like this visceral reaction almost. And I was like,
Huh.
yeah,
That's so interesting that you got like that reaction of, oh
yeah,
no, it was me. Which is
yeah,
hilarious because it's like as writers when we write like, doing horrible things to our characters, it's
yeah,
we feel something for them, but at the same time it's like I have to break you down to
right.
lift you back
Right,
up.
right. It's like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, it's for the plot. I promise I won't. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's so interesting. And then I love the dragon addition to it. I think that just a cute animal sidekick just
Yes.
steals everyone's hearts. We just love
Yeah.
them. And what made you want to choose a dragon?
Because I love dragons.
Yeah.
That's the reason.
It's in your bio,
Yep.
female characters with dragons, so
Yep.
love it. And then I love that you mentioned that your favorite part is writing characters who grow and admit that they've made a mistake. I think that's probably one thing that makes me love a character in a book even if I initially didn't like them at first. I think that being willing to admit you made a mistake, willing to admit your flaws just shows that you are human and you're growing and I don't know. I just it's very admirable of someone to admit that they are flawed.
Right.
Yeah. So I love that. I love that you do that. What is the one piece of advice you would give to a writer? And then what is one piece of advice you give to an author or aspiring author?
All right. So the piece of advice I would give to writers is mainly to listen to your gut feelings. Because sometimes you write a scene and you know as you're writing it that it's not going to fit very well, but you keep writing it because you think, I can fix it later. Just go ahead and fix it then. If your gut is telling you it's not right, just pause, reassess. If you need to set it aside for a day and think about it a little bit more and then rewrite the whole thing, do that. And then for aspiring authors, I would say the willingness to share your work is one of the most vital parts of getting your books out there. And not just sharing them with people that will read them and say, that was really good, sweetie. Share it with people that will give you constructive feedback because you need somebody that'll be honest with, I really enjoyed this, but this needs work. This was cool. This I don't get, that they'll ask you questions. I typically call it you need your okay, but why person. That you need somebody to read it and go, okay, that makes sense, but why do this way? I have a reader like that in my writing circle, and she's been very good at, okay, that's a cool idea. I really like it, but why? To make me dig deeper and think of what is the specific reason I'm adding this to the story? Does it actually fit with the overall story? Does it really need it? So those would be my
Yeah.
two pieces of advice.
I love that. I think that we can get like we can love our work so much that we're so afraid of getting critique feedback on it, but it's
Mhm.
so worth it when you especially like when you're working with like maybe a plot hole, you maybe didn't you realize there's a plot hole there and they're able to
Right.
point that out. They're able to see your story through a different lens and it can hurt. It can hurt to hear like really harsh feedback, but when you're able to just assess and try to see through their perspective, And like if you need a break, like, you know, I'll think
Exactly.
about what you said and then
Mhm.
reassess. It can help you be able to get in a better mindset, but it definitely does help. And then your story becomes stronger.
Absolutely. And a follow-up to that, I forget where I read this or if somebody told me this, but when you're getting that feedback, it should be at least two people need to agree that something needs to be changed. And one of those
Mm,
people can be you, the author. But if you have, let's say, 12 different beta readers and only one of them says, I don't like this name, that doesn't mean you have to change the name. That means that person doesn't like that specific name, and that's okay. But if you also haven't liked the name as the author, then go ahead and change it because you want to,
yeah.
not because one person out of a dozen said so.
Yeah. That is really good. Just like what the majority, if the majority say something needs to get
Mhm.
changed, then you should really look at it again.
Yeah,
But yeah, if it's just one person, then
exactly.
yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, let's get into some rapid fire questions.
Great.
All right. So what is your favorite trope?
My favorite trope would be epic storylines with lots of characters, as evidenced by there's Wheel of Time.
Oh
Most
yeah.
stories ever.
Wow. So have you read the entire Wheel of Time series? Oh
Twice.
my, twice? Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. That
Yeah.
is dedication.
Mhm.
That's amazing. So is it one of your favorites then? I'm assuming.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is one of my favorites. Yes.
Cool. Cool, cool. Maybe one day I will actually finish it. I've only read the first book and I know there's so much more that's ahead of
There
me.
is. There is.
Oh gosh.
I also
Maybe.
understand it's everybody's like cup of tea because it is a longer series.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, there's 13 books, and it takes a while to get to action sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but when you're a bored high school student, it's a lot of fun.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's true dedication. But yeah, that's a great trope too. I love the multiple POV epic fantasy. Love to delve into that. What is your favorite writing beverage or snack?
Beverage is water. I just drink water all the
Mhm.
time. And snack would be green grapes or Skittle gummies.
Mm, very good.
Mhm.
Very good. And then what is your favorite book currently?
My current favorite book would have to be Red Rising. Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I've read
All
it like
right.
5 times now. I have a problem.
No problem at all. There's a book we love and we have to read it again.
Mhm.
I desperately need to read Red Rising. I feel like that series has been staring at me in the face for years. I have the ebook on my Kindle
Okay.
and I just need
Yeah.
to just sit down and read it. So,
I tell people you just have to promise me to get to part two. Like get through the first chapter of part two. Some people don't like part one, but the
mhm.
rest of it is there's a lot that happens past part one.
Okay, good to know. I'll keep that in mind. And then what are you working on right now?
So currently I have Woven of Lies is a loose Romeo and Juliet retelling, is currently
Mm.
with beta readers. And I say loose Romeo and Juliet retelling because my premise for that was what if Romeo and Juliet survived, but Romeo is still a player and not
Oh,
very faithful. Yeah.
I like that
And then
twist.
Dream.
Nice.
Yep. And for drafting, I'm currently working on drafting Lone Soul 2 to finish out the duology.
Awesome. All right. And that's really cool. And then do we have like an expected release for that or you're just
But I'm
still
only 3
working?
chapters in, so I don't know.
You don't know. Okay. That's
Uh,
totally fine. Got to work with
hopefully
our
next
schedules.
spring, but hopefully next
Yeah.
spring.
Love it. And I mean, you just released Lone Soul not long ago either.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. And then where can readers find you?
So I am on all social media, well, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Those are the main ones. Yeah. As Dragonheart Bookworm, all lowercase, no random symbols in the middle, just Dragonheart Bookworm. So that's where I am. And if I haven't posted in like a month, but it's April, May, or August, it's because I'm a teacher.
Gotcha. Good to know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll have all the links to your socials and the description below or in the show notes. And thank you so much for coming on and talking, Kristen. I had a great time.
Thank you.